agenda tonight, and we need to kind of get through things and be done by 7 p.m. So I need to be kind of that, buzzkill person that says, can we get down to business here? And I apologize for that, but I do want to make sure we give every department enough time to go through their report and that we get the questions answered we needed. So with that, before we start, Mr. Mayor, any comments that you'd like to make before we get going here?
Thank you, Mr. Abrams. No, just the fact that, I appreciate the Board of Estimate members for looking very closely at the things that are absolutely necessary and other things that maybe we can put off for a little bit of time. This is a very challenging budget year. I know you appreciate that. And we want to do the best we can for everybody in the city of Norwalk. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Tom, do we want to go ahead and jump right into things?
Yeah, sure. So tonight we're going to cover two areas of community services, starting with fair rent area, and then we're going to move on to youth services, and then the balance of the evening will be with the economic and community development team. Let me just admit 2 more people here, and I will start sharing my screen. Everybody see it?
Yes,
And how is the sizing?
This is Leisha. I was able to join as a panelist from a link in my calendar, but I just wanted to see if we could get IT on, because when I tried to open it as a participant to view as a member of the public, the link on our website doesn't work. So I just want to make sure that members of the public are able to access the meeting.
Okay.
Do members of the public have the ability to ask any questions, or they can just observe?
My understanding is this is an opportunity to observe, and their questions can be asked either via email or during our public hearing on the 22nd.
That's my understanding as well.
That is correct.
So if they wanted, anybody in the public wanted to listen, they could. Are the Zoom numbers made public? Are they're probably on the city website someplace?
They are.
And that's what I'm bringing up right now, is that the link on the city website isn't working for members of the public. Tom, actually, if you want to get started, I can call IT and have them
Okay, I
work on
think
fixing that so that you can focus on this. I just wanted to let you guys know that right now the public can't get in.
okay.
Thanks.
I think Rodney listens to most of these, and if not, I think Larry might as well. So.
Okay. All right, Tom, like we did last night, let's maybe start with the bottom line for each of the departments. We can go
All
back.
right, so sure thing. So we're going to start with the fair rent. We have Carlos on, as well as Lamond. No head count discussion on this one. No adds, no deletes. But you can see down here at the bottom line, they are requested $310,000. We recommended $310,000. It's actually a drop from last year, 10%, or $37,000.
Yeah. Carlos, Lamont, one question for me, just for clarity. The significant increase in other contractual services, what's driving that, please?
It's right here.
That's 5298, right? And let me just say, I just want to welcome Carlos. So I'm going to take the lead, but Carlos Duque is our new fair rent coordinator, and we're really excited to have him here leading the charge and ensuring that tenants who have challenges, who may want to understand their rights. Carlos is now here, and so just wanted to acknowledge Carlos, Ed.
Welcome. Thanks, Lamont.
So you're referencing the 44,000. Am I accurate?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes, definitely. So to Tom's point around decrease, we brought in Carlos, obviously had a lower rate. And then also we are keeping the part-time attorney because some of the cases that do come through the fair rent, we really need that higher level of legal expertise. I don't know if you recall that we had an attorney with us all last year because it was challenging to find a person to really manage the fair rent office and complaints as Carlos does. So that's a part-time position. The other where we also have in that budget, there's about 15,000 BET commissioners out of that 44 that is dedicated to our language line. And we are definitely seeing increase and using our language line. As you all know, we have our chief diversity and equity officer, and we are certainly, and we should be promoting to all departments throughout the city, the language line. And so that budget line item is also lives in that uncontractual services for our language line that we are constantly encouraging all employees to use when there's a language we don't have in-house.
So just so I repeat it back to you properly, that $44,000 is part language line and part contracted legal services. Is that fair?
Yes,
statement?
sir. Yes, sir.
And is there a reason that we contract the legal services outside of corporate counsel's office?
Yeah, my
Directly with
understanding.
you?
Yes, that's not their expertise. So we actually have a fair rent attorney who specializes in these type of hearings.
Okay,
Which was recommended from corporate counsel. The recommendation came from corporate counsel.
thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions related to fair rent from other members?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
I have.
Okay, Jim first and then Kendrick, you after that.
yeah, so it's 15K for the language line and the remainder is for the attorney, correct?
Approximately, yes.
So how much did we spend on the attorney last year?
I don't have that number, but I do know that we had to come before you to ask for additional monies because it's the ebbs and flows of when we use the attorney, how challenging the cases may be from year to year. But I do know, reviewing our records, 15,000 is dedicated for the language line. So if we do the math, I don't have my calculator with me.
29,000.
About
Thank you.
29,000.
Thank you. I'm an Android, not an iPhone. I got my iPhone with me.
Okay, so I guess my question is that when I look at all your numbers from the FY23 revised to this year budget, with the exception of the contractual services, it looks like it's pretty much autopilot here, that you're taking the same numbers over and over each year. So I'm just curious that when you did your budget, did you look at what the actuals were and say, yes, I have to increase, or no, I can catch a little savings on this particular line? So
Well, if
every
you look-
line that I'm looking at, it looks pretty much the same.
Well, from fiscal 22 to fiscal 23, that 24,000 doesn't include the additional that we needed to pay the attorney.
Yeah, pardon me, I got that part. I'm saying just everything else when I look at that. So my question originally to you was the 24,000, how much of that have you already used? So you're saying that you've used up all of the 24,000 in this year's budget?
I don't have that number for you, Jim, in terms of exactly what we used year to date.
Okay, so then going on from that, if I look at all the other numbers above that, it looks like from the fiscal year 23 over to this year, you've used pretty much the same numbers. So my question is, did you look at what you spent so far this year to, against all of these things, to come up with a new budget line for this year, whether it's higher or lower? It really doesn't make that much difference.
Right. Right. Yes. So right. If I'm hearing you correctly, looking at last year's budget, most of these are consistent. It's that line item that we were just talking about that can fluctuate. And so we suspect as evictions are going up and our offices get inundated that we will need more support from legal services.
But what about the rest of them? Did you look at to see how much you've spent in order to come up with a new budget for this year? That's the way budgeting is presumed to work. You
Yes,
take
and
a
that
look at
was-
what you, okay.
Yes, and that was the only area where we have seen an increase.
Yeah, I guess, Lamond, what Jim's trying to say is, I get that that's where they're increased, but picking on machinery and equipment rental as just an example. It was approved at 1716 this year. You put it in again at 1716. Did we really spend 1716 this year? Or did we spend less than that? And should we adjust this downward because of it? Again, we don't
Yeah,
want
I
to beat
see
you
what you're
up too
saying. I
much.
would have to
You're down,
confirm it
you're down
completely.
10% year to year. So
Yeah,
that's a good
yeah,
thing.
this is, I get it. I get it. I would have to really confirm it. What we did do was look at our contracts and that was a number that we still felt very comfortable to move forward, although it has been the same consistently.
Okay, thank you.
The-
Kendrick?
Is it- Go ahead.
Yeah, the only question I had was about part-time wages. It looked like there was a jump of about 27,000 from actual to the approved, and I just wanted to get better understanding of why that is.
Sure. So we also have a part-time ADA coordinator. So that position is in that line item. We
And that
haven't had it. It was dormant for a while as we were trying to fill that position for many years. So we now have successfully have that position filled.
Okay.
So, but that was in 23, right? You had 27,000 in 22. That was the actual. Then you bumped it up to 55,000 last year. That's this year. So my same question would be, and what Kendrick might be asking too, is did you spend $55,000 on part-time help this year?
Oh, I didn't. You're at 450, 140.
I've got it highlighted on the screen, Lamond.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that year-to-date actuals on that is 34,933 right now. So he's well on his way to spending 55.
Yeah.
Lamont, probably the reason, although I'm not in fair rent, that number was lower in the 22 actuals is that position was vacant for a big part of 22, and that's probably why you didn't spend the entire budgeted amount in 22. That's why the actuals were only 27,960.
Right, but the run rate for this year puts you close to that 55.
But I'm a little concerned that I have a sneaky suspicion that maybe that exercise was not done.
Well, these are the numbers that my departments we worked through. So
So
Yeah.
here's what I'd like to suggest, Lamont. The question back to your department heads is, can you please come back to us and confirm you've looked at FY23 actuals to set your FY24 budget targets and not simply done a lift from last year's plan to this year's plan?
certainly.
Okay.
I have one more quick question too, and this is probably has to do with the labeling here. We got postage, and again, it's not a big, none of these are real big dollars. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I'm not beating you up on it. I don't mean to be beating you up, but postage, box rent, etc. Is that just postage, or do we have PO boxes that you're renting?
No, we don't have a PO box.
So that's what?
So the postage.
Okay, well, anyway, let's
So
go back.
it's our mailing. So everything we have to give out of fair rent, we have to do certified letters,
Right.
certified mail.
All right, so you're going to take a look at this, as
Yeah.
Ed says, you're going to take a look at this and get back to us. That's great.
You got it.
Thank you, Lamont. And again, congratulations on bringing your number down year to year. That's exactly the type of thing we want to see. So all these questions, we're doing this to everybody, but you're in the right direction. We just want some more clarity.
We'd rather have more money too.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move to youth services, Tom?
Sure thing. All right, here's youth services. You can see down at the bottom line here. request of 656. That was the recommendation. That is an increase of 87,000 over 23 approved, or 15.3%. Primarily because there is a headcount item to discuss here. That's in the first line. Full-time salaries, and we have Dave Malenchek here along with Lamond to discuss.
Yeah, I don't know if the big driver of the increase in our department was we've added a full-time. We've requested and discussed it with Henry and assumably the mayor's office. We've, as you know, you hear it in the news all the time. There's a huge youth mental health crisis. And the care coordinators that work out of our office do assessments with youth that are referred through the Juvenile Review Board program, the schools, the police, general community. They do those assessments. They connect those youth up with behavioral or mental health behavioral care providers in the community. And we've just been inundated this year. Our numbers have shot way up. We've got probably about 70 youth under care for 1.5 people right now. So we've been trying to manage, but we're at the point where we just can't sustain servicing the current load of referrals with 1.5 staffing. We needed that additional position, and I think that was communicated up the line, and that's how it landed in the recommended budget. The actual cost of that position, the salary is $66,065, and the other differences in that number would be probably contractual wage increases across the board, is the difference between the salary for the care coordinator and that 83,897 number.
Okay. And Tom, Henry, a question for you first, and then back to Dave. Is that a head count in the approved head count list you sent us the other day? I just don't have that in front of me. I want to make sure we did, as a city, we did approve that head count.
We did. Initially, it was not. And then in further discussions in January, it was reinstated. So that is currently in the request.
Okay. And Dave, is that individual now on board, or are you still out recruiting?
No, that will be a position that once the budget is settled, we would begin to recruit. The budget is settled May 1st. So as soon as the budget is finalized and approved, we would probably start recruiting for that position in early May, and hoping to have somebody on board July 1st when this new budget season kicks in.
Ed,
Okay.
when we add headcounts during the budget, it's for next year's budget starting July. So
That's okay.
in the budget this year, but it's contemplated, and when the approval goes in, as Dave said, they start the recruiting process.
Okay, very good. I just, again, I apologize. I don't have the approved headcount data in front of me that Tom sent last night. I just wanted to make sure that was in fact an approved headcount. Questions from other members of the BET on youth services?
Yeah, this is Troy. Real quick, just like in the last with Lamont, there seems to be 10 of the line items are identical to the actual, the approved 23. So, once again, the question is, are we looking at this, or are we just putting in the numbers that we anticipate from the previous year, or are these actual spends? I know they're not large amounts, but I think in budgeting, as Jim said, in budgeting, you really have to take a real hard look at this.
Yeah, one of the things I would say in response to that, Troy, is a couple of years ago, we did go through every one of these sort of, even though they're not big numbers, we went through every one. And one of the ones I'll point out is our mileage. I mean, we used to have like $1,200 in the mileage account, but we just found that we weren't really spending that much money for a variety of reasons. And we knocked that down to the 372 in 2022. We only spent $84. One of the problems, I think, in terms of looking at actuals and translating that across every one of these little accounts is, this is the first year we're really kind of fully getting back on track after COVID. And some of these accounts were impacted by COVID because, we weren't necessarily spending money on certain things that we normally would during the COVID years. And so that's why some of these accounts might have floated from, say, last year's budget to this year's budget. We did a couple of years ago, go through each one and say, can we trim some of these? And we did some of that. And certainly we can, I think after we get this year's actuals, can look at these and say, are any of these are all of these numbers still relevant, or some of these, can they be trimmed further? I mean, I'm looking at most of mine. They're relatively close to what's budgeted. You know, we budgeted $300 for postage. We spent $312 in 2022. We budgeted $320 or $396 for newspaper subscription. That went up. The cost of that went up. Our membership dues, we did adjust that because those costs went up. So I think most of mine are pretty close. But for example, things like advertising, there are years when we spend very little on advertising. That's primarily for recruitment reasons. And then this year we had a lot of turnover. We had 3 or 4 staff leave this past year, and we had to recruit a bunch of new people. And so we spent much more on advertising. So I try to avoid, that's difficult to gauge from year to year, but I try to avoid a situation where, you know, maybe one year I only have $150 in actuals in that, so I cut it down to $150 for the budget. But then the next year I have a lot of turnover and I spend 3 times that amount, and then that account is short and I have to find the money in other places in my budget. So I try not to cut it so thin that when a situation like that happens, I'm short on budget, rather than maybe at the end of the year I turn $1,000 or a couple $1,000 back, versus, you know, having to be short money, or worst case scenario, come back to you know, you guys down the road and saying, hey, I'm short $1,000. You know, I try to avoid that situation as well 3/4 of the way through the year.
Yeah, Dave,
But I think most of my numbers are fairly accurate in terms of what we budgeted and what we've spent.
okay,
I have
And you-
2
go ahead.
questions.
go ahead,
Um,
Kendra.
So the first being, in taking on a full-time care coordinator, would they be offsetting the responsibilities of someone who works overtime or part-time? And then the second being, I see in the comments, the salary is 66K, but the increase is for 80. So what is that difference in
Right.
increasing?
The difference in that is the salary for the full-time care coordinator is 66,065, but the rest, that difference is, you know, I think everybody in the department is union, and so there are contractual wage increases. So that 20-something thousand difference is the spread with all the various contractual wage increases.
Recall, Kendrick, last night I mentioned it's the step increases as well. So in some cases,
Right.
depending on the employee, it can be somewhere in the 4 to 5% range. It's not just the 2.35%.
Right, and because we have several new employees, because we have several newer people in the department, most of those people are getting step increases, and that's why the contractual wage increases are larger than if everybody has been here a long time and they're just getting the COLA versus a step and a COLA factored in.
Other
So-
questions for Dave and the team?
Yeah, I don't think we got an answer to Kendrick's question. I think his question was that we've got part-time going up, part-time help going up, but you've added another head. Shouldn't that part-time go down?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we could look at. The intention was really to maintain that, based on the kind of volume that we're seeing, but that might be something that we can look at going forward in terms of how well we're meeting the, you know, the demand of referrals that we're getting.
Well,
Dave,
you had to hire a new person,
Mhm.
okay? And because you couldn't take care of because of your caseload. And
Right,
I would assume that part-time person was maybe helping out on the caseload.
yes, they are.
So if you were able to get that caseload taken care of with a part-time person, I'm trying to understand, why did you need to get a full-time person with benefits and so forth?
I think the idea originally, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, was that you asked to add a full-time person and then not have the part-time person, so that the increase in salary would, that not be that much.
Right. Yeah, I
So-
mean, we could certainly look at trimming the part-time person out in lieu of the full-time person that we would be replacing that position with.
Yeah,
I think that's
I
what-
would ask that you
That's what
make that
Keith
revision.
explained, I think.
I'd ask that you make that revision, Dave, please.
Okay. So
Okay, and then I just have a little, I just wanted to get some clarification, Dave. On the, in 22, your salary was 330,000. You added about 182,000 in 23. That was what, two or three people?
Well, there's another thing that you have to, that you might have to be aware of, Jim, and that is Darlene Young.
We moved Darlene, David, to your budget.
Yeah, Darlene Young, whose salary is 88 something, was previously under the human services budget, and she was moved into youth services. So some of that increase in our overall salary line is related to picking up, having somebody move from one department into ours.
Okay.
That's some of that.
So how many headcount do you have that's in that regular salary line? I didn't have the headcount numbers in front of me.
After we will have 7 with this budget. We will have a total of 7, and that includes Darlene. We had 6, and then absorbing Darlene into our budget, that makes it 7.
Okay.
Okay. All right,
So you
so
have six plus one now.
Yes, but Tom, will you make the change in editing out the part-time, zeroing that out, the 40,300 and zeroing that out?
We want to zero it out entirely.
Yeah, we'll zero
Okay.
it out.
I will.
okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments for youth services before we go to the art commission?
One
Well,
last,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ann.
the question is, when you bring on the new person, can you bring them on initially in a 1099 role if it's appropriate and if that's what is acceptable to the individual? And then once you find that you like that person, then you bring them on as an FTE, and it can save the city some money initially relative to benefits.
I think I would have to talk to HR about that. That's challenging because you're bringing on somebody in a similar role. I mean, we already have a care coordinator who's in a certain step, and who's in a certain labor grade and thing, and then to bring on sort of a person in the exact same role, but bring them on as a 1099. I also think, this is still a challenging recruitment environment, and not to be offering that position benefits makes it typically also the positions we've been hiring for, I know all of our care coordinators are bilingual. That's also a smaller pool that we're pulling from, qualified bilingual master's level clinicians. So I wouldn't want to do anything that would create an uphill battle in terms of recruitment. And I really wouldn't have a preference to do that.
I understood, but if it was something that was acceptable for the individual, I understand the challenges and the desire for someone, but
If we were recruiting an individual and they said, hey, I don't want city benefits and I don't want the other stuff, I just want to come on as a 1099, would I personally be opposed to that? I wouldn't be opposed to that. I would have to talk to HR about the feasibility of it, but that's typically when we recruit for full-time staff, they're not 1099s. I don't know. I would have to talk to HR about the feasibility of that. But if we had an individual we were recruiting and they requested that, I certainly wouldn't say, no, we won't consider that. I would have to talk to HR about the feasibility of that.
I think we need to move on, your team. I just. Hang on, Ed, let me just follow up on that same question. We spent $37,000 last year on part-time. Was that one person?
That was well, not a full-time person, but it was one person. Yeah, one part-time person.
Working a whole year?
Yes.
So why wouldn't we just keep that part-time person instead of hiring a new person?
Because we're not keeping pace with the amount of referrals that are coming in. the amount of, I mean, we could do that. We'll have a wait list. And that's not my call. I'm asking for the level of staffing I need.
All
So
right.
that kids are referred for evaluations, they can be met with on a timely basis and connected up. And then, of course, we do follow up and a number of other things are part of that function. So based on the level of referrals we have, we need the second full-time person.
And David, let me just say this, because I think it's important, Jim, and to the commissioners. Since I arrived, we have become the coordinating entity to ensure youngsters who are in need of services. The Norwalk Youth Services Department becomes that referring entity. So we serve that for the entire city, working with all the local nonprofit. And to David's point, we have certainly seen an increase in referrals with families needing these services. And so to put families on a waiting list, I just think it'd be very challenging and detrimental to families who are in needed services, which is why we have requested to move to a full-time position. But to your point of looking at that part-time, that's definitely something that, David, we can work with Tom to make sure that's
For the past several years, Dave has been requesting an additional person. And we looked at his caseload and we agreed that if he could give up the part-time person and bring in a full-time person, it wouldn't be that much more money. And we obviously, except with the benefits, but we felt that would help him take that caseload and work with it effectively.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up on that and see if there was any possibility that we could substitute that, but yeah, that's a good answer. I agree with you, Dave.
Okay, all right. Dave, thank you. Appreciate it. Tom, you've got the pen to zero out the part-time. Let's go ahead and move to the art commission, please.
All right, so going down to the bottom line on economic.
Carlos, you can sign off. You don't have to stay. Thanks.
All right. Yes, down to the bottom line on economic and community development here. Whoops. You can see, and this is a little bit different from what we looked at before, and I'll explain why. Over here, you'll see the original request of 6 million. The mayor and Henry recommendation of 5.7 million. That was an increase of 347,000 or 6.5% over the previous year. Subsequent to that decision, we had told all of the divisions that they were welcome to make line item adjustments if they didn't agree with the recommendations, as long as they stayed within our recommendation, so the total number. So Jess and her team took that advice and looked at their line item detail and came back with an overall reduction of $40,000 more. So their revised request is now 5.7. Total increase of 306,000 over 2023, or a new percentage of 5.73. There are several headcount items to discuss here, but we will go back up to the top and start with the Art Commission. And again, I would encourage you to focus on these items over here with the blue highlights, because those are reflective of the revised request. So starting here with Art Commission, the total is 15,400, a reduction of 1,300, a 7% reduction over the previous year.
Okay.
And I believe we have Sabrina on, and we do.
Yep, I'm here. So the major reduction here is really taking from other professional services. We are absorbing the Arts Commission social media accounts with the Visit Norwalk stuff. So we're really simplifying a lot of that stuff down. We had a little bit of less of expenditure in 2022. We weren't doing showings and art gallery coordination because of COVID and people still not coming out. We have ramped those back up since. So our line items are being spent more than they would have in the previous years. We also took down our typing services. We made it in line with having the exact math of having one meeting a month, and putting that into what Telesco usually charges us. So that's the really only changes here. And then you'll see the negatives of $2,000, but that's really only just rolling it up into business expenses account instead of keeping them in other contractual services and other supplies, which they weren't really using since what they were spending the money on wasn't really categorized correctly in those two line items.
Okay. So Sabrina, just again to clarify your point, the other professional services here is really all the social media, the paid social media spend?
Yeah, so we had a part-time person on. I wouldn't call her part-time. She wasn't even close to part-time. But we had a person on that was doing the social media management for the Arts Commission. And we've since stopped that, and we've now just rolled it in with our Visit Norwalk stuff. So it's completely in a separate line item that lives within the business development and tourism budget. So we've decreased that out of there.
Okay, so then what is the remaining $8,000 in other professional services?
The remaining $8,000 is for curation services. So if we have any murals that we have, so we have the art and public places capital budget line item, we need to have curators on board to manage those projects. So that's what that funding goes towards.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from any other board members for Sabrina?
What about the business expense?
The business expense is essentially just those two accounts rolled up into a new line item. Well, not a new line item, but a line item that matches more about what the spends were for. Those business expenses are usually for the curation of the mayor's gallery. We bought hanging systems for City Hall, those types of expenses.
Shouldn't that be the same as the above one? If that's curation, isn't that? the
No,
same?
a curator is an actual person that we're taking on board to manage a project, sort of like a small project manager for murals that get installed. The business expenses are really if we're putting hanging systems in City Hall, if we're printing artwork out to be hung in City Hall, if we're having supplies being bought for a specific art installation, those types of expenses.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Sabrina. And again, thank you for being down year to year.
You're welcome. Thank you.
She has more coming up, Ed.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
still here. I'll still be
No,
on.
I know.
Okay, moving on to Chief of ECD. The main driver here is salaries. Again, as we've seen with others, it's steps and contractual increases, which accounts for the 8.38%. We have Jessica on the line to take any questions.
Jessica, what's in your $10,000 of other professional services?
Yep, so that is related to the potential library expansion at Belden Avenue. So we've worked with Stantec in the past to be able to complete some renderings for the potential library expansion there. We've been looking in the past at 1 Belden, 3 Belden, and 11 Belden. And so we've been working really closely with the library board and building maintenance and facilities to be able to look at advancing that project. And that $10,000 is there to be able to support any additional renderings that may come forth as part of that project.
So realistically in FY24, do we expect that project to move forward given all of the expense pressures on the city?
The actual cost for the library expansion is in out years in 2026 and 2027. So what we were looking to be able to advance in 2024 was the potential update of any renderings that we have in place, and also bringing on an architectural firm to be able to help us with update a building plan and update the architectural plans for the proposed expansion. We've been looking and working with the library board to talk about what type of expansion they need and if they need an expansion as large as one that they've been exploring in the past. And the answer is that they believe that they should look at the numbers again and try to understand what they think might be a more feasible project. Right now, currently in the capital budget, we have $2.1 million for architectural services, which would be approximately 10% or could be 10% of the total project cost. So we do have that in the capital budget, but we've been looking at keeping that whole for a couple of reasons, one of which, as I mentioned, bringing on that architectural services. So the 10,000 is what we've seen in the past from different consultants and being able to do this work. And one of the things that we wanted to do was be able to be thoughtful about thinking strategically about out years for the library, as I said, 2026, 2027, but being able to be prepared to bring on that architectural team and guide them to the greatest extent we can.
So I'll ask the question another way. Is that a must-have for 2024 or a nice-to-have for 2024?
I believe that it is I believe that if we need to find $10,000 to get rid of, I think that that's somewhere where you can take it, more so than in other areas, because we've done a pretty big scrub on our budget. I think we're coming in $40,000 less than what we had originally requested. We've tried to move money around to be able to compensate where we think the funding should go and where we think the funding does belong. I feel pretty strongly that we want to advance the library project, even though we're focused on out years. If we think that we can make up that 10,000 somewhere else, or even come back for a special appropriation if required, then I think this is somewhere where we can take that versus other line items that I think are a little bit more crucial.
Yeah, so my recommendation would be we take it out of the budget, and if this moves forward, you come forward and we'll take it out of contingency.
Yep, I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jessica?
One question is, why is this not part of, why are we taking this over, not the library?
Originally, the project looked at 1, 3, and 11 Belden, and 11 Belden is a private property. And at one point in time, we looked at being able to understand if the city was to take ownership of 11 Belden, if if there would be a private development portion included in that. And as a result of that, specifically because of the potential for a private development and the work with the redevelopment agency, we included it in the economic community development budget.
Okay.
The only
We're gonna take it
question,
out, we're gonna take it out anyway, so it's material.
Yep.
right now.
All right, Kendrick, go ahead.
yeah, the only question I had was about wages and salary. Is there an increased headcount for the 21K?
No, there's not actually an increased headcount. It is that we had, there's only 2 of us in economic community development that are included in this number. And it includes increases. What happened this year is that we had our administrative assistant we had HR, we worked with HR to look at her position and assess her position based on the work in which she was doing and the amount that she was getting paid. And she did get bumped this current fiscal year. So the increase shows that increase in steps. And as Tom Ellis had said earlier, the number increases with steps in different situations, but her base pay increased in addition to the steps. So I think that what you're seeing is a little bit of I think you're seeing sort of those 2 pieces come together in this particular budget.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to take the 10K, and if you need it, we'll move it to contingency.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for everybody's awareness, the mayor is going to have to leave us for another meeting, so we'll keep going here. Should we talk code enforcement?
Yeah.
Okay, coming down to the bottom line on code enforcement. Request of $1,478,000, recommendation of $1,401,000. No revisions on the revised request, still 1.4 million, or an increase of 20.53%. And I do believe there are some headcount items to discuss here. And I see Bill Ireland on the line to help us out with those.
So Bill, you want to start with the head count stuff, please? Because that's a huge number.
It is a huge number. We have been understaffed for quite a while, and we have find it not easy for us to pull in part-time help at this level. One thing that we also look at is our projected revenue for this fiscal year. Right now is to be 2.8 million, and I believe we're going to be close to 6 million by the end of next month. So we've literally tripled, almost doubled at least our what we have to take care of out in the field. One of those positions is also a blight inspector, which is the inspector that we have because of the neighborhood cleanups, et cetera, that we are being responsible for, and it will also increase our revenue in the blight account, which is a separate entity entirely. We took in last year, or this running year so far, over, I think, $120,000, and I think that extra inspector would up that even more, and keep the neighborhoods that are requesting help in a clean position. The extra building inspectors needed above all because of what we have on our table here. I only have 2 inspectors, and if you wish to check with other towns, we are smaller than Westport, Darien, and you want to talk a town close to our size, Stamford is working with 10 inspectors, Greenwich 9. We get it done, but we definitely need that one more building inspector to help out our cause here and what we're trying to accomplish with all the big projects coming in. On the table coming in is the Noack High School. We're in the middle of the Cranberry School, the Noack Hospital, the 467 West Avenue project, amongst others that will be coming in the next fiscal year. So these projects we collect the big dollars are 3-year inspection projects, and it's not going to be done with the staff we have. And it's been impossible to find part-time. We've advertised and no one's replying due to the fact there's more full-time jobs out there with people retiring than people looking for part-time. So that's.
Bill, if I could just add, so that the board has the numbers for the 2024 budget. The blight enforcement officer is budgeted at $66,000, and the building official is budgeted at $97,000. So that $207,000 increase, that's about 160. The balance is in the contractual increases and steps.
Okay.
If, do
And
you,
all of that headcount's approved?
Pardon me?
All of that headcount is approved.
Yes, in the meetings and discussions between our recommendations as well as with the mayor, they are approved currently.
If I could.
oh, I'm sorry.
This is Ann Yang. I would just like to say, I think this department does an incredible job with the resources that they have and the fact that they're amazingly profitable, given their expense, given the revenue that they generate for the city. And I think they did a tremendous job during COVID. So I think that, you know, they made it as if the city was still fully operational and buildings could get done. And so I think they've done an amazing job with the limited resources that they have.
Thank you.
I see Jess has her hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit of context to what Bill is talking about. So when the Sono collection first came on board and it was being permitted, we actually permitted the superstructure and permitted all of the tenants within the superstructure itself. And that year we saw, we topped out at just about $4 million in revenue for Bill's department. This year, we estimated that we would be in and around $2.7 or $2.8 million. And as of the end of February, 9 days ago, we were actually at $5.2 million in revenue. So we've almost 100% surpassed what we were expected to see in this current fiscal year.
Mhm.
But to Bill's point, I think that, you know, some things have, Bill is very modest and he's very humble. And not only is Bill continuing to do his work with the building department, but the state has asked Bill to step in as the ADA compliance official who's now reviewing all of the school plans and all of the public city projects for ADA compliance. And Bill also is our blight officer for the city of Norwalk as well. So, you know, we're really trying to get Bill's support, and I really appreciate Ms. Yang's comments, because it's something that I think Bill's done such a great job at, is in being able to make sure that the city still functions during COVID and that the permits were still going out. And we did that in very creative ways. So the interesting thing is that we you'll hear for building and code enforcement and planning and zoning that we may have thought that permits may have softened a little bit or slid off a little bit, and we haven't seen that. We've just seen them continue to increase over time for a number of different reasons. And we feel like now is the time to really be able to support teams to Bill's team to a different level. But I wanted to comment really quickly on the blight inspector position, which is that we've worked with the community quite a bit in South Norwalk specifically, but in other areas to be able to understand what is needed from a proactive standpoint when it comes to blight and neighborhood improvement and being able to make improvements to the community as a whole, citywide. And you'll see the position here in Bill's team, but you'll also see that in Steve's team in planning and zoning, we actually changed a zoning assistant position to a deputy zoning inspector. And the reason for that is to be able to create a team, one person on Bill's team who's dealing with blight and one person on Steve's team who's dealing with zoning, to be able to work together in a very proactive way to deal with contractor yards, to deal with blight violations that we're seeing, and to act as that team who's not only being responsive to complaints and but the team that's going out proactively and working with the community to educate them on how the city sees these things and how the city can be a help and support to that. So that's, you'll see the position here, but you'll also see a position in planning and zoning as a replacement to a position that was vacant. And I wanted to give a little bit of context as to what we're trying to achieve through these two positions.
Thank you, Jess.
And thank you. And Ed, just real quick, I just want to echo what Ann was saying. In my years on the BET, the Board of Estimate, Bill has done a great job with the building and with the upcoming building. All you got to do is drive around Norwalk and see what's happening with all the upcoming buildings and planning. So I think he's done a great job, and I'm very happy with what I'm seeing here so far.
Thank you.
And if I could just add,
I
one more
would just like to say the same thing too. I think Bill's doing a great job, and we've covered this year in, year out. And I think that one of his requests in the past has always been to get more inspectors. So I'm happy to see us getting that. On the other hand, I think that I'm anxious to look forward at the revenue that we budget, because I think with these additions, we should be able to bump up our revenue based on the work that his inspectors do. So do you have an idea of how much income you think you're going to generate with these additional inspectors?
Well, first of all, the income is based on the economy itself. No matter what happens, we've seen drops. I saw it happen in the 90s, the early 2000s. And I mean, it's happened. I've been here 4 times, seen it 4 times since I've been on this spot. What it should help is the increase of possible with the fines that would relate to work being done without permits, illegal structures, where we could put more time into that. And we put as much time as we possibly can now, but I think you would see a positive on a revenue end for something on that side of the table that we really haven't experienced before.
Bill, just,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ann. Go ahead.
Just wanted to make one more comment, which is 10 years ago, Bill came in and there was always a discussion on succession planning. And I think the type of people that we need to make sure that Bill has the support underneath them are the type of people who eventually could step into Bill's shoes, because I would suspect that he at some point in time wants to retire. And we need to just make sure that that is provided for, given the level of productivity that he personally produces.
Fair. Bill, I do have one last question for you, and I'm not trying to trap you, please. I echo everybody's comments about the value and the benefit here. But you made a comment earlier that it's difficult to find part-time and other help. Yeah, you're looking to take the part-time salary and wages up as well by about 35K year to year. I understand we need it, understand there's benefit. Do we really think we can find somebody, given your comments earlier about how difficult it is to find less than full-time employees?
You have to understand that part-time is not for inspectors. That part-time is for the plan reviews we're going to go through. The state no longer does the Board of Education of plan review.
Okay,
The high school itself is probably gonna take 2 to 2.5 months for one person to do it straight time all the way through. We have someone part-time now on staff that's helping a little bit, but that's his forte. He's the retired state building official who's agreed to
Okay.
help us. He'll also then undertake the Norwalk Hospital, which is gonna be an immense project.
sure.
The other big project that may come along. So 3 years from now, when all these are technically caught up, let's say, that number should go down, whereas it should go down after this year. I never spend it. I think I gave back 70,000 last year or some number like that. Just
Yep.
would know exactly what I gave back. So I always give money back. I don't spend it for the sake of spending it. So that's my.
Understood. Understood.
But Bill, along those lines, do you anticipate that of that 135, you're gonna spend the whole thing, or can you give some back now?
It's all based on the progress of Norwalk High School. I mean, the Board of Education, we don't, as you all know, we don't collect any fees anymore, so there's no reimbursement. It's straight from us to do it. And it's not just that, we're probably gonna be hiring some clerical help too with all the paperwork, instead of going full-time, part-time through a temp service, et cetera, which we're looking into. I can't see where I can, but trust me, I don't spend it for the sake of spending it. That's all I can tell you, but
Understood.
Now, I think you've heard what we've been talking about with some of the other big guys. If we could get that down to what you absolutely think you need versus what you would like to be covered for, we can always come back and take it out of contingency if you run out of money.
I think, well, maybe.
But no, I think you've got years and years of experience in this stuff. I just don't think
I
that we,
understand what you want to do. I understand 100%, and
No, okay.
I always give money. I mean, if you brought it down to 120 now, I would have no issue with that. As long as I know if it goes over, I can go back. That's
You
based on
can,
progress
so
of the
let's,
projects. That's
you-
all it
you-
is.
yep, you can, Bill. So let's do that again. In years that weren't so difficult, we might leave it here and then just move it into the general fund at the end of the year.
But I understand.
But rather right now, let's take it out of the budget so we can keep
Yep.
the tax rates as low as possible. So we'll take that line to 120
That's
and then
fine.
we'll stop torturing you, I think.
That's
Noted.
okay. I don't mind the torture. I've been through it before.
Any additional
that's-
comments before we move on?
the only other one would be the additional or other professional services. That looks like it's been taken down a little bit, but
That,
that's
that-
a,
that's basically, as Jess explained, I'm in charge of the blight.
Yeah.
Graffiti,
okay.
cleanups, that's where that money goes.
Okay.
So
Alright.
so David Shockley came over from the redevelopment agency to Bill's department to create the neighborhood improvement team. So David Shockley's budget came over, which is about we $45,000. So we've taken some out of that, but that's the money for doing artwork on the traffic boxes. It's all of the blight remediation. It's all of the neighborhood improvement. It's all of the neighborhood pickups and so on and so forth. So that's where, and originally we had it, originally we actually had it in business expenses, but we felt that it should be moved to other professional services. And we did that over the last couple of years, but that's where that funding comes from.
Okay, thank you, Jess.
That sounds like a lot of nice to do, we'd like to do, but not has to be done.
It's the goal of our department to be able to increase the quality of life for residents in Norwalk. So as part of that, we created the neighborhood improvement team. The neighborhood improvement team consists of David Shockley, who's the neighborhood improvement manager, in addition to Stephen Bruschi, who is our blight inspector. So, the work in which they do is, I think, integral to the city and the quality of the city that we want our residents to have. And I think that if we want to see graffiti under underpasses and on rocks and, on the side of a school and, garbage and things that we don't even want to talk about, here on the call, then I think that's something that we would eliminate. But, the work in which this team does, I think, is exactly the mission of what our department is meant to do for the city.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood you when you said painting. I think you alluded to painting walkways and things like that. What you're talking about is cleaning up what people have painted on walls and things like that.
That's
So this is
That's
more-
correct. Right.
This is more cleanup than anything.
Yes. That's right. That's exactly it. So the neighborhood improvement team is meant to clean up the neighborhoods where things have gone on that we don't think are suitable for our neighborhoods and for our walks to school and so on and so forth.
Fair enough.
All right, thank you. I need to move us on to planning and zoning, please. Again, thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Thanks, Ed. Just for pacing purposes, we're at 6:32 right now, and there are several individuals on this call that have a 7 o'clock call, so.
Yep, so we need to move quickly.
And we do have a couple of large areas. So down to the bottom line on planning and zoning here. A request of $1,364,000, recommended of $1,281,000. That's 132,000 over 2023, or 11.5%. And again, looking under the blue shades with the revised request, that is now $1,188,000, a drop of 93,000 from the original recommended, and an overall increase of 3.45%, which is now within the guidance of 3.5%. Taking it up to the salary line, there is one headcount item to discuss, and this was a roster move. I believe this is Mr. Pacelli. I know we have Steve Kleppen on as well. If you could talk to that.
Sure. So Greg Pacelli, who's the transportation planner, and he's been with the city probably 3 or 4 years now, prior to the formation of the Transportation, Mobility, and Parking Department. So he'd been working with us, but since that department formed, his duties more line up with what they do. So the idea is he's just going to transfer over to their department. So that's kind of the shift there.
Okay. Any major points, concerns, or issues for planning and zoning?
Just to know, when we do get to the TMP section, you will see a corresponding increase in the salary to offset that 102.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Let's go ahead and move.
I think this is similar to what we've seen. If I take a look at all of those things below wages and salaries, it looks like pretty much with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, where we've just transferred the same amount from year to year in the budget. Same question we had earlier is, are we really analyzing what was the actuals? Where are we going to come out on the actual when this budget was prepared?
Sure, yeah, and I was paying attention when you were talking about that before. And most of those are, as you said, static costs, but a lot of them end up by the time the year washes, moving around to one place or another. For example, like the legal notices line item for our current fiscal year, we're already over. So I'm going to have to shift a little money around to cover that. And it's some of those are just variable based on the volume of activity we're seeing. So right now, we're seeing a lot of activity on the commission level, so we have to run extra legal notices, and that's a very, for what we get out of it, it's a very expensive cost, but we really don't have any choice but to pay it. The other items are, like whether it's training, whether it's, the telephone cost, or whether it's the, our copying duplication fees. Those are kind of based off, the fees that we've been, or the, the bills that we have to pay related to those line items. So we're not trying to add anything, but it's just to cover what we think are the actual expenses.
Okay.
But have you actually done that exercise of looking where you stand as of the end of February, let's say, or the end of January, and saying, hey, look, it looks like we're going to be over here. It looks like we're going to be under here. We can save a little here. We can save a little there. It's small potatoes, don't get me wrong, but it's worth taking a look. I guess that's my mantra, I guess, this week.
Yeah.
Is that we looked at all these things.
Yeah. So Steve, let me summarize it. Right. Let's just, if you can just take one more look at that, looking at year-to-date actuals, see if there's any adjustments, any minor tweaks. we would appreciate that. Kendrick, is it?
Sure, and I'll try to do those just on the down. I'm assuming you don't want me to bump them up.
Yeah, bump them
Correct.
up. If you think it's gonna go
I mean,
up.
make them accurate, make them as accurate as you think they need to be.
That's right.
Yeah,
And that goes for all departments.
I was just gonna echo, I'm sorry.
Jim?
I was gonna echo Jim's point. I noticed like historically, there are some amounts that were $200 or $300, and then they jumped like $1,000, and it seemed like you kept in line with the approved amount. So just like drilling down and really giving us the money you're spending or the money you need.
Okay.
Yeah, we can take
Okay.
another look.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Two comments, Pam. One is echoing what I said about building code enforcement. P&Z did a tremendous job during COVID, and the city looked seamless in terms of its operations relative to their responsiveness. The second is, could you let us know what you think your revenue is for this fiscal year and then upcoming?
Sure. So I was just looking at that today because, in thinking about what we're going to talk about tonight. So the fees that we collect are, small in comparison to what building does, just based on our fee schedule and what we're really allowed to charge for things. We're meant to cover our costs, not for anything beyond that. But we're going to exceed, based on what we've accrued to date versus what we projected, we're going to far exceed that. And based on conversations I've had with, Bill and I were talking about it this afternoon about the projects we see in the pipeline. Not only that'll come in for the rest of the calendar year, but into next year. And based on what we're seeing at the commission level, I don't see a slowdown. I thought it might happen a couple different times, but it just hasn't let up. At times we've seen some slight dips in the volume of like the smaller residential projects that really took off during COVID, but we're at a very steady clip now that, the bigger projects will definitely carry that number, but I don't see a slowdown.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, what is the number that you're
I'm sorry?
anticipating? What is the revenue number that you're anticipating for this year and then for next year?
I think if I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have that open in front of me to verify. I think we forecasted $150,000 in fees collected, but I think we'll hit above 180.
All right. So Steve, I'd ask again, I just want to keep us moving here. If you could get back to us on the revenue number, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
I can get you that quickly.
Yep. Can we move to conservation?
This one's also Steve. Coming down. to
Yeah,
the
and
bottom.
Alexis Karaketti's on as
Oh,
well.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So coming down to the
part-
bottom line here.
Yep.
Request and recommended very close at 293,000. The revised request stayed the same, overall increase of 3.77%, very close to the 3.5% target. No headcount items in this area. And we will take it back up to full-time wages and salaries, which is contractual increases and steps. And take it away with any questions at this point.
Yeah. So not a question, guys, but same comment from planning and zoning. Everything other than salary here looks like a direct lift from the FY23 approved budget. I would just ask you to please go back and look at the year-to-date actuals forecasts for the full year and make sure those adjustments are right, reflected, et cetera. Again, it's not huge amounts of money, but any dollar we can save is a dollar we can save for the taxpayers.
Will do.
Any other comments for conservation?
Just want to echo that again, Ed. Absolutely true. I'm foreshadowing the next couple of groups also. The one thing people should not be doing next year is just copying the same numbers from the year before. Thank you.
From an economic community development standpoint, we'll do that with each of the departments. We'll do that with community development office and then the 4 departments that fall within our group. So we'll scrub that all the way through.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jess. Thank you. That way we won't repeat ourselves. All right, shall we move to transportation mobility?
Yeah, coming down to the bottom line here. Request of 1.68 million. recommended at 1.5 million. Revised request came in at 1,675,000. This is where the offset to the headcount move in planning and zoning is. Recall that we talked about Greg Pacelli. So you'll see up in the salary section, the corresponding increase to offset the decrease in the other area. We do
Hello,
have,
everyone.
do we have Jim Travers online? I see Jim and Garrett in the room.
Good
Yep.
evening. Good evening,
Good
guys.
evening.
So I
So-
understand that you're time for time. I'm happy to go through each item or happy to answer your questions to keep you on board, but we have all the detail to get you back up for anything you would need.
So one of my first questions is around the part-time number that you're putting in there for $24,000. That looks like a new investment from a headcount perspective. Can you talk to that just a little bit, please?
Certainly. So we're putting in here a part-time admin to assist. The department used to have a full-time admin in prior times. We're only asking for a part-time admin to assist with the grants. So since Garrett and I have joined the city, we have written $69 million worth of grant requests for covering a number of projects. We're currently actually going through the reconciliation of several grants right now. They are extremely labor intensive to ensure that the city regains that investment, because we do the output of cash and then we do a reimbursement to the provider for those. So we desperately need some assistance in ensuring that we reclaim the revenue from those grants.
Okay.
How much
Additional-
revenue are we talking about here?
So we've written, since we've been here, we've written $69 million. But when we look at the grants that we have so far this year, we're under contract with Wall Street. We're doing a project with Seaview Avenue, Gregory at Fifth. Phase 4 signals are roughly around $3 million. Phase 5 signals are roughly around $3 million. The West Avenue adaptive is roughly $1.5 million. NRBT phase 2 is roughly about $3 million. West Rocks Road is $1.8 million in a combined of two different grants. And then we have community connectivity, which is roughly for $100,000. Those are the ones that we're just doing reconciliation for right now. We have others that we have not started yet, and others that we are working on, final requests from CONDOT based on additional information to fund a number of other projects around the city.
Okay, so Jim, my memory, I will admit fully, is faulty, but in conversations we had either around last year or during the year, there was comments made about our ability, once we get these grants, to actually get the work done in time to qualify for them. I guess I'd put it that way. Are we confident that we have the ability to execute on all of this grant money that you and the team are doing an incredible job securing for us?
Well, so in one of the aspects, we were able to secure through the ARPA funds, a 3-year conditional employee who is outside of this budget. So his sole job is actually moving some of those projects. And then the other ones that that we're going to look at. I think that I think COVID did a number of wonderful things for us, right? In one instance, it may have opened up the door of what we could do for what many other municipalities have, clerk of the works, and they take people who are associated with the capital expenditures of grants and focus on those. I think when we start to execute those and we start to get more of this work done, and you guys see the results of the efforts that were been made, I think that we can be in a position to do that. But we are very cautious about the workload that we have and the ability to get it done, which is why I asked for the $24,000 to ensure that we remain in a position to do this. But your comments do not go unnoticed. They are a concern of ours. And we remain very cautious, but we think that we have a plan that we will be able to successfully execute these in progressive order.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments from anybody else on the board?
Yeah, the only question I have is about business expense. seems like you guys are below the 3%, but I'm just trying to understand the increase in business expense line item 5286.
So largely that goes again for the number of projects that we are moving out, so that would be, any community, some type of community event, planning for that, getting those things, but we, it is, those business expenses are really about, how we can communicate better with the residents and the, to get the word out. So I think that is very much directly tied in with one of the other items that we have on there, and that is the printing and duplication. And I understand that, that we can come back. So that has a reduction based on historical usage, but I think what you're seeing that historical usage was really, what happened during COVID, and the fact that Garrett and I just really ramping up to get the work done had that down. But I firmly believe with all of the communication that we have for the various projects that we met and referenced, as well as several others in the queue. What we have done, I think, what we do well is really communicate to the people the work that we're getting done in their neighborhood. So I think those are really critical points in getting the budget through, to have them understanding the investment that the city is making in their neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have one question.
Yes.
There is $60,000 in overtime and temp in wages and salary. Can we put part of that, is that a must need, or can we put part of that into a contingent?
So our we're actually running a little bit over. So like, we have to fund, so the bike walk commission, so that's staff that has to do those meetings. Those are our night meetings, they're overtime. That we actually plan out and have been through the number of what would be allocated for there. The temporary is really what we look at, in interns, in getting the seasonal work done that, Ed was talking about. A lot of our work is, we do a lot of planning in the winter months, right? And then go crazy doing construction. So the temp gets us through the additional parts of that. I think we had done, in some instances, we were just through with we did a budget, help me out, Tom. What am I talking about? A budget transfer in order to make those, to get those services done. So I don't know that we have, but I think at the end of the day, I'm not asking you to do that. I just want you to be cautiously aware that most likely in the printing and duplication, we would most likely have to come back at some point in time for an increase in that, because I don't see that we could be able to successfully meet the communication with our residents under the dollar that we have allocated.
And I believe you referenced the overtime too, and part of our department's responsibility is a safety related response for our traffic X in the field. So we have 94 signals, and I think we were out on 137 different various calls to keep the system running in the past year. So that's where that funding goes to.
Yeah, we're on call 24/7, so they have to respond to any signal out at any point in time. So.
Okay.
Ed, what looking at the last item on 5623 special events, $10,000. What is that? And is that an absolute?
So that has been the funding provided to the Bike Walk Commission since its inception. The Bike Walk Commission, we really charge with the public education about the campaign. So we really believe that safe streets are combined by education, enforcement, and engineering. We got the engineering covered, and we really rely on them. And they do, those are for events that they're going to do to get out the safe streets message, maybe teach kids how to ride bikes in a bike rodeo. They have done events where we've done National Night Out and we participated there. We've done the Nice Festival with we're out there. So it's a lot of that is really geared towards education related.
And you need that 10,000. It looks like the same number for the last couple of years. That number you need for definite for this coming budget season.
Yeah, actually, we keep them tied to the $10,000. They have really big dreams, right? And which is really great that we have a community that's involved so much. But we really tied them to the $10,000. But I think given their druthers, they would be probably tripling that with the amount of events that they want to do, but we tie them back to the 10.
Okay.
How much have we spent this year so far?
Well, $1,200 to date.
So,
$1,200.
again, a large part of that is actually they have, we've had some transition into the Bike Walk Commission, but they have a big event that they're planning for Bike Walk month in May with a number of different events that are coming on here. So we work with them and Greg, who is our point person for the Bike Walk Commission, and they're planning, they're really gearing a large number of events that are happening in the spring.
In the year before, you spent under 8,000.
Yes, I think again, it was COVID related. We weren't out there doing as much then. We really were hit very hard with being able to do public outreach at that time.
Yep. So look, I get it, guys. I want to be respectful of time. Jess, I'm gonna ask overall, right? The ECD budget is hot, right? It's just running hot overall. I know we talked about a lot of small line items, but I would ask that you and the team look through the overall budget again to see if everything in here is absolutely a must-have for 2024 versus things we'd like to do.
Okay,
Right?
will do.
It's just at almost 6%, it's almost double what we're looking for from all of the city departments. So you're hearing all the comments. You'll hear similar comments as we get to business development and historical. Let's just scrub it all very, very hard, recognizing that this is a year to take as much out as we can. We can always address things in contingency rather than padding budgets and giving money back to the general fund at the end of the year.
Right. I think what we can do is we can work with Tom Ellis to look at the last 3 years or last 4 years of actual spent and do a little bit of an analysis on what the last 4 years spent on each line item looks like and be able to forecast that out a little bit. And then the other piece is that if we do decrease some of these line items, like we had talked with you about the library expansion or even Bill's number from 130,000 down to 120,000, if we we'll try to scrub and do our best. And during the year, if we need a special appropriation or we need to come in and ask for something to be able to support a project that we're doing, we'll absolutely 100% take it through the process.
Yeah, this is the year to lean into that side of the process versus having extra budget to return at the end of the year.
Got it.
Okay. Let's quickly move to business development.
Yeah,
Right, Sabrina.
do you want to add in lieu of the fact that we have to get out of here in 5 minutes, do you want to just follow up on this one with the rest of the economic development?
I'm fine with that. I will say though, before we do that, I think it's a good idea, Jim. But did anybody on the board have anything specific in either business development or the historical commission that they wanted to call out before we go?
I can say for business development, we actually reduced a number of the line items because we found that Sabrina and I do a lot of work together, and we figured that we could probably reduce one budget and work off of the other one. So we were trying to really consolidate our efforts. So you'll see a number of line items that are actually decreased there. And what we were trying to do is exactly what we're talking about. What are our actuals and what are we using, and how do we sort of make that a little bit more efficient and effective for the budget? So I'll say that about business development, tourism, and then historical is flat. So but then again, as you mentioned, if it's flat and it's carrying over, then we need to look at what the numbers were in the past. And I actually texted David Westmoreland to let him know that exercise needed to be done. And so we'll work with David Westmoreland to get that done for you.
Okay,
thank you very much.
And I agree with you there, this Troy. Yeah, critical eye on these things. I appreciate her coming back to us. I mean, the 150 other professional services jumps out at me. That's line 52, 58. It went 3 times from 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Stuff like that. Just come back to us because I mean,
That
we
specifically,
really
we-
need help this year.
Yeah, that specifically, we have a contract in place, a contractual obligation.
Yeah.
I would just add that there are a lot of other categories, just like we saw yesterday. There are a lot of other categories here that it would be nice to figure out how that can be understood.
We can come back and when we come back with the other numbers, we will come back with business development and tourism and walk through that in more detail for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, apologies for rushing through the back end of this. I think you've got the key message. I'm sorry if it looks like I'm looking sideways. You're on one screen, my camera's on another. It's not that I'm not trying to make eye contact here. But with that, thank you. I think again, just you get the mission here, right? Is squeeze every cent out of this we can, please.
And
Absolutely. Will do.
one more thing before we cut off, we can't have these artificial time blocks going forward. I mean, because we're taking a critical look at all this stuff, and I think they're all open-ended going forward, but we really shouldn't be racing.
This is the only one, Troy, and it's because we have another
I understand,
finance and
Tom.
claims meeting, so the rest of them are open. Yep.
I understand. I just don't want to have any.
No, it's a fair point, Troy. We should watch that with calendars going forward. Okay, with that, thank you all. I think, Tom, we reconvene now next week on
Monday at 6:30, you're correct.
Yep.
And I'll get out a similar report tomorrow during the day for the departments that we'll be covering on Monday evening.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Tom.
Thank you all very much. Have a
Weekend,
nice
guys.
evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.